All right, thank you guys for sitting down with Selig Film News here at the Dallas International Film Festival. We are talking to the crew from Loud Crazy Love. We are so excited you guys came. Welcome to Dallas. And before we get started, can you introduce yourselves to the fine folks at home? Let them know your names, what you did on this film.
Well, thank you. We are very grateful to be here and involved in the festival. I'm Brian Welch.
My name is Trey Hill. I'm one of the directors.
I'm John Humphrey, one of the producers.
Scott Mayo, the other director.
And I'm Sam DeTore, the other producer.
All right. Well, let's start at the beginning. Trey and Scott, there is a tremendous amount of, this incredible compilation of interviews plus home videos plus network broadcasting footage plus tabloid photos, everything compiled together to make one cohesive story. How did you even begin to cull all this material to know what you were going to use?
Mind blown. Just the question. Oh my gosh. That's a super fantastic question. I think we have 29 terabytes of media, assets that are over 2 decades, so it is extraordinary. At the center of the film is Brian's first person telling of his story. So ultimately it began there, and it began with how are we going to create the appropriate arc out of his telling of it, and then how do we take advantage of all the things that we have at our disposal with 2 decades worth of footage, plus we followed this story for 4 years.
Yeah.
I don't know that answers your question. How did we actually get there? That was a bit of a miracle, maybe.
The reason he can't answer the question is because Scott was also the editor of the film, and it was actually his day in, day out task to do that, to figure out what moments stay in and what moments go. Mm-hmm. And just to pump his tires a little bit, I think it took us 2 years to get through the entirety of the post process.
Yeah.
And that's a big investment of time and energy, and Scott would consistently amaze us with the gold that he would unearth from Brian's home movies, from like you mentioned, media placements. I'd come in to review edits that he'd done, and I'd have my jaw on the floor at some little thing that he was able to unearth from the 29 terabytes of stuff. He was a master finder of needles in haystacks, I think, is just what it comes down to. He was patient, and he was tenacious, and he was he just had this singular focus for what the story needed to be and what were the right sort of beats to hit. We had all of that as a team sort of bulleted out and designed, and then Scott just colored it in amazingly.
2 hours and 40 minutes.
Oh yeah, the first edit was 2 hours 40 minutes, and then we actually had to go back.
You trimmed it down a little bit from that.
Yeah,
just a wee bit.
A touch. Well, when did the team kind of come together? Whose idea was this film initially? Who came to who?
That's a great question. I think you need to answer it.
Actually, I was at my house in Nashville. Mm-hmm. My friend Angie came over. Angie Clausen came over. She's with I Am Second, and she saw all these awards everywhere. Mm-hmm. And she goes, and she said, "You should do a documentary." And all of this stuff that you're doing with your awards, and she saw it and I go, I've been trying. Actually, I felt like I needed to tell my story in a documentary because I have a lot of footage since 2005, and it kept, when it started up, it would something would happen, and then it would go away, and I gave up. I was like, I don't want to do no stupid documentary. It's nothing comes together. There's all this drama always. So when she said that, I was like, walls up, nah. And so, but what happened was we talked to I forget who talked to who. Do you remember? But Sam and Scott flew out to Nashville, and we talked about it. So you want to add to it?
Yeah. Well, this team together has worked with Brian really back since 2008, mm-hmm. and we did a short film with Brian for I Am Second that really captured people's imagination really around the world. And all of us were involved in one form or another with that shoot. Fast forward then to 2012, when you were considering 13, yeah. when you were considering going back with Korn. And we started asking ourselves the question, well, who is documenting Brian going back to Korn? This seems like a pretty momentous thing, particularly given the story that he had told us just a few years earlier.
Yeah.
And so we asked that question, and we said, well, let's go ahead and take a look at that. And we said, maybe the first thing is just go out with him for the first week. Let's get permission to go out with him, meet with the band, follow him, and see what is really out there. And that's what we did. And then you guys went out with him on that first week, and that precipitated the meeting with Brian.
So since this history goes back as far as like a decade ago almost, Brian, what was it back then that allowed these filmmakers to earn your trust back then and even through now?
Yeah, Brian.
Earn the filmmakers to earn my trust.
Why'd you let us do this?
Because it all came back to the I Am Second short story that they told about my life, and I thought it was very professionally done, because I have been involved in some media, just with interviews you do over the years, that, they're just, the credibility just sometimes isn't there, and the professionalism, and so I was a fan of their stuff. What it comes down to, I was like, oh man, those guys are awesome storytellers, amazing. And so it's just the way the film looks and everything they do is just like top notch. And so that was a no-brainer for me, actually. And I'm Second being behind me, because when I went back to Korn, there were some people that were just like, hateful with it and everything. And so to have I Am Second behind me, and actually not just with words, with, hey, let's capture this, there's something special happening, meant the world to me. So,
talking about trust and support, I mean, not just from you, Brian, but I mean, talk to Janaea, obviously, your family, your bandmates, and there was just like this tremendous outpouring of honesty from everyone. A lot of people got just like raw and real. Like, how do you be sure that you're protecting these people and respecting them when they are, really honoring you with that level of trust?
That's the hardest.
You guys want to handle that?
Yeah. I mean, I'll freelance for a second.
Go.
Relationships.
Yeah, I mean, we tried to build trust on the road with everybody we sat down with. We had conversations with Brian and Tiffany at Awakening before we ever went up there.
Sure.
And really just kind of tried to get at the heart of what we actually cared about, which was at the highest level, like, we think this is an amazing story and we only want to tell the truth. But we also said, like, we want to tell the truth, like, even when it's like all the tough places. Mm-hmm. Otherwise it's real easy for this film to get pigeonholed in some space we're not trying to get pigeonholed into. Yeah. So I think everybody was on board with, like, we just want to tell the honest story, and it's I think most of our lives are actually pretty tough and complicated, and they're not they don't tie up in a bow real well. Yeah. And so our goal was to represent this story correctly. Mm-hmm. And I think everybody that entered in, the bandmates, Janaea, everybody was just on board with that idea.
I could probably add one layer to this, which is, as much as, as the interviewer, to sit down and ask the questions, somebody has to be vulnerable, right? I think beyond trusting me or trusting Scott, they trusted Brian. Mm-hmm. And we were the beneficiaries of how they had seen the change that's celebrated in this film worked out in his life. And so he trusted us, and we got the benefit of that being extended to his relationships, his most meaningful relationships, the people who were right at the epicenter of his darkest moments and his greatest triumphs. Mm-hmm. So I think there's just a symbiotic relationship between Scott and I and the rest of the team as filmmakers, and then Brian as the subject of the story. I really think that's a huge part of it. I remember going to Chili's in Indiana with Janaea. She was on the fence, like, is she going to do this or not? And that was a real pivotal dinner where she was like, I'm in, let's do it. And
she went all in.
She did. She went all in.
I mean, she let cameras, I don't know if you guys have saw it. Okay, so my daughter, Janaea, you could see the intense, like, counseling
she's been
sessions.
through some raw stuff.
Yeah, and she talked about it and let the emotions come out, dealing with those things. So she's my hero. She was like 15 at the time, and she had walls up, and I said, Janae, you don't have to do this. And I told her, if you decide to do it, we'll have all the footage. If you don't like some of it, when we edit it, we don't have to use it. Or you can say no now. It was just up to her. And she met these guys, and she felt comfortable with them. And so she just said, I think it'll help some teen girls, and so let's just do it.
Yeah, I found it really encouraging watching it because of what you said. We're not trying to wrap this up in a neat bow, and you don't ever do that. It's kind of like, you know what? Life just sucks sometimes. It's really, really hard. You don't really find the Emerald City at any point. And yeah, so who are you kind of targeting audience-wise? Like, how do you feel like they're going to respond to that?
Sounds like a Sam question.
Is it really a question for me, or am I just the guy who hasn't answered yet? Audience-wise, this film's really interesting. It would be natural for people to assume it's a rock doc, but it's not, and it never has been for us. It's a relationship story. It's a story about humanity and struggle and the hard stuff that people go through and try to face. And so we think fathers and daughters are perfect for this film. Obviously, rock fans are going to like it because of the backdrop of rock and roll. Korn fans are going to be interested for a lot of the insider stuff that this film delivers. And then there's a segment of either a faith audience or people who are just interested in spiritual things or that part of Brian's story. And I think it melds all those things in a way that's surprising. So we've been trying to figure that out. How do we get all those groups come see the film? Because when they come see it, at least everybody who's seen it with us, the reaction is universal, from a guy that looks like Brian to my mother-in-law. Everybody walks away from the film feeling very uplifted.
And for the super hardcore fans, because Brian, you've written at least 2 books, but for the super hardcore fans who've read the books, know a lot of the details from those books, what do you think this film will allow them to see that's not captured in the books that stand out to you?
I liked what Trey said what do you call it? When we put out a press release and you gave the comment about the film, he said, like, we're all, what did you say? Do you remember? You'll say it better than me.
Well, I don't know
about warts and all.
Well, I think this ties to what Sam just said, which is, in terms of audience, there's a real universal sort of there's a universal thing that all people share. We're all just broken in our own ways. Brian has meth. That's his unique detail. I have mine. Scott has his. We talk about those together as a group. And I think everybody can come into this as, like Sam said, a father or a child and say, I've hurt or I've been hurt. Most likely both. And this is a story that at the end of the day celebrates that we need each other. I need Scott. That relationship that we formed over the last 5 years has been instrumental to transforming my life, not in ways that are going to be celebrated on screen, but in ways that are profound to my family. That's
Absolutely.
Awesome. Brian's story is this symbol of hope that's available to everybody, and I think that's the unique angle that hasn't been explored in a lot of his books. A lot of it's been about him and what he's gone through, and this is actually a story about a dad who has tried his best to make himself better on a daily basis because he desperately loves this little girl. And that's it. That's at the heart of the film.
And I will add to that in answer to your question with the fans, if there's a heartbeat and someone's breathing, it's never over. It is never over, and you can get through anything. If you've damaged people or if you've been hurt, like he was saying, it's never over. So I want them to take that from the film.
I was going to try to answer like real specific. You were saying like what's different here. I mean, it's obvious, like everything Brian's done to date has been printed word, and we get to see I think when he writes, he's writing in generalities, or he's, you get to see specific experiences. You get to see Janaea on the road in that world. Like that's crazy. And then our cameras followed along and caught very unique things for 4 years. So yeah, there's an intimacy. There's a, that I think it just puts skin on what some people know of. But there's, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll stop.
No, I think you're definitely
I
in
like
the
that.
space. When you write a book, there's things that you share. When you watch a film, it's as if you're in the room. There's just a different way that you experience, even if, and I don't know that we actually explore the same stories in all the same ways. Like, it's different when there's this one shot, it's a home video of Brian's where you see him in the mirror holding the video camera. Like, you truly enter into this story in a way that is visceral and profound, where you can stand in his shoes in ways that I just don't think you can if you're reading somebody's account of something.
Well, guys, thank you so much for bringing this film to Dallas. Congratulations. Can't wait to see where it goes. And, of course, big thank you to you, Brian, and Janaea. If you are watching this, huge, huge thanks from the audience.
That means a lot. Thank you guys for everything.
Thanks.